All right, good morning and welcome to Beech Creek Baptist Church. It is certainly good to be here this morning, certainly good to have each one of you with us this morning in person. And as I say every Sunday morning, and thankful for those of you that are joining us online. And I do want to invite you, if you ever have the opportunity, you're ever nearby, or if you ever just want to make the opportunity to be here and join us in person, we would love to have you. We do have Sunday school at 9 o'clock. We come in for 9:45 for a time of worship. We do prayer requests, do a couple of songs, and then 10 o'clock we do go live, Facebook and YouTube. Text alerts, if you want to be able to keep in touch with us and stay connected with us, encourage you to sign up for that. That information is right there on the screen. Did get a sweet message from somebody this week. Said, hey, preacher, I know it's Pastor Appreciation Month, and I just wanted to send you a message, let you know that I appreciate you. And I got that message, and I was thankful for that, and that meant a lot to me. So you know who you are. Thank you for that. Also, if you want to support our ministry here at Beech Creek, you want to give to God through your tithes and your offerings, you can do that with the address that is right there on the screen. You can make it out check. You can, I don't recommend sending cash, but you can do that. We do get those, and we do appreciate that. And we use that to try to build God's kingdom. And that's what it's all about. And that's what we try to do here at Beech Creek. Also, we're thankful for each one of you online. And if you are online, we'd appreciate if you could leave a comment. Let us know that you're listening. Share button and get this message out, not only for those of you who are listening, but we want to get it out to everybody else on the internet as well. Other than that, let's get going this morning. If you have your Bible, turn with me in the Old Testament. We've been in Genesis for the past couple of Sundays. We've looked at chapter 26. We've been in 27 this morning. We're just going to do a few verses out of chapter number 28. Going to try not to keep you very long at all. I don't have a lot for you, but I do have something for you. I believe God has something for you. So we've been looking at the life of Jacob, the story of Jacob, and how it's kind of an unusual story, but God does include this in our Bibles. And they're Jacob and Esau and these brothers, where they were fraternal twins, and it's always in conflict with one another. And we see how in Jacob's life is just one conflict after another. And so we first saw how Jacob was kind of conniving. That was kind of his attitude, is kind of who he was. And the first week we saw that he got the birthright, persuaded Esau to sell his birthright over a meal. And then last week we really saw who Jacob was, because he went in to his dad, went into Isaac, his father, who was aging, who had lost his sight, and he stole his brother's blessing right out from underneath him. And so when Esau discovers this, Esau comes in, he was expecting to get a blessing, and the dad, Isaac, was like, you know what, I've already given it to someone. I can't give you that same blessing. So it's no longer yours to be able to have. And so Esau discovers this deception, and he vows that he's going to kill Jacob, his own brother. That's how important this blessing was. And what Rebecca does, mom, arranges for Jacob to flee from home, and she tells him to travel back to Haran, where her brother Laban lived. And we'll meet Laban next week. So today we're going to be in Genesis chapter 28. We're going to look at verses 10 through 19. Jacob is on the run. All right. He's afraid his brother is going to kill him, and he's on the run. He finds himself alone. He finds himself with no shelter. He's there by himself, and he's not where he's going yet. He's left home, and he's traveling, and he's in between where he used to be, but he's not quite where he's going to be. But he finds himself in the middle of nowhere, and he makes himself a little campsite. He falls asleep, and he has a dream from God. So let's look at verse 10. It says, Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. He reached a certain place and spent the night there, because the sun had set. He took one of the stones from the place, put it there at his head, and lay down in that place. Now, you and I understand traveling in that day and time is not like traveling in our day and time. It's not like he was in a car and he stopped at a local motel and he went in and got a room and he laid down, watched TV for a couple hours, then he went to bed. That's not what is happening in Jacob's life. Traveling in that day and time, especially traveling alone. Understand, Jacob's by himself. He's traveling alone, and it was very dangerous. He only did so because he couldn't find any shelter, and that night had fallen on him, and he had no one to take him in. And a lot of times, if you were like me, when you grew up and you read this story and you were taught this story in Sunday school or in Bible school, you always kind of pictured a little rock, and Jacob's out in the middle of nowhere, and he has this little rock, and he kind of lays his head down on it for a pillow. But from my understanding, what a lot of Bible scholars tell us now is that there's a different meaning here. The Hebrew can be translated to suggest that he put a stone, possibly a large one, behind his back. It was behind his head to protect him from being attacked from behind. So it almost gives you the idea that he had leaned up against a rock at night, not really laying down, but he had backed himself up. That way nobody was going to come up from behind him and attack him. Because remember, he's on the run from his brother. He has no idea where his brother is. He knows his brother wants to kill him. And so he's on the run. And it suggests that Jacob was afraid. I mean, was Esau trying to stalk him for revenge? Were there wild animals that were lurking about? Were there bandits? Would he make it safely to Haran? He had no idea what lied ahead of him. And so if he did, what kind of life is he going to make for himself? He has no idea really where he's going or what's going to happen to him. But now comes the dream. And the dream comes in two parts. The first part centers on what's often called as Jacob's ladder. You've probably heard that term, whether you heard it in church or just heard someone else talking about it. But let's look at verse 12. And it said he dreamed. So he'd lay down, he'd fallen asleep, and he dreamed. And it says a stairway was set on the ground with its top reaching the sky. And God's angels were going up and down on it. Now, once again, Bible scholars are explaining to us the Hebrew language here. In Hebrew, we call it a ladder, but it can also mean a stairway or a ramp. Now, stairways and ramps were used by the Babylonians when they built temples in the shape of what's called a ziggurat. All right? Let's back it up a minute. So Jacob, on the run from home, he had been conniving his entire life. He had deceived his own dad. He had stolen from his brother. And Jacob was at a point in his life where he thought to himself, you know what? God doesn't want to have anything to do with me. And I would say most of us can probably relate to that. Most of us, there's probably been times in our lives where we felt like God doesn't want to have anything to do with me. I've gone too far. I've done too much. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm traveled away from God. I've traveled away from where I'm supposed to be. And God doesn't want to have anything to do with me. I believe Jacob represents so many of us who leave God behind them when we reach that age in our lives where we go to start a new life. We see this happening all the time when high school students who leave home and they go to college, you know what? They kind of leave God behind. You know, it was okay for when I was with mom and dad and we were doing things and going to church, but you know what? I don't know if I feel like that anymore. I don't have time for church anymore. We see that when high school students go to college. We see it when they go to the military. They get their own apartment. Whatever beliefs in God they gain from the family and church, they're kind of discarded as childish and irrelevant. And God, they think, is back there where I left him. But we're going to see Jacob finds God in an unusual place. Jacob finds God when he wasn't even looking for God. The same also occurs when people change course in their lives. You know, a lot of times someone who believed in God while they were married, they think they left God behind just because they got divorced. Some who used to believe in God when they went to church, they think they left God behind when they left church. You know, I'm not attending church anymore. God's probably not interested in me anymore. I'm kind of doing my own thing on the weekends and on Sunday, or I'm working too much, or whatever it is. And I understand if trouble comes, they'll send up a prayer to God and hope to find him. But most part, they think like Jacob, that God was left behind. But how shocked Jacob had to be to discover that God was right there where he was. Right where he was. He said, how awesome is this place? This is the house of God. This is the gate to heaven. We may think we have left God behind, but God, listen to me, can find us anywhere at any time. God is always on the search for you and I. Even when we're not aware of God's presence, God can be hovering right over us. The Psalm 9, verse 9, it says this. He said, if I fly on the wings of the dawn and settle on the western horizon, even there your hand will lead me. Your right hand will hold on to me. Listen, we're mistaken when we think that we've reached, we are mistaken when we think that we have to reach a high level of belief or goodness before we can reach God. That's what a lot of people think. I have to be so good in order for God to find me or God to be interested in me. God doesn't say at the end of the way you may find me. No, God says I am the way. Jesus said I am the way, the truth, and the life. If we're in a hole, the way begins in the hole. If we're in the bottom of that's where you can find God. The moment we set our face in the same direction as God, God then comes close to us. Now, the second part of Jacob's dreams receives the most verses 13 through 15. Jacob turns his attention from the ramp that connects to earth to heaven, and he focuses on God who is standing over him. Look at verse 13 in chapter number 28. It says, the Lord made him. Now again, where's Jacob? Jacob's on the run. Jacob's in the middle of nowhere, and he wakes up, or he's having this dream, and God speaks to him, and he's standing right there beside him, and he says, I am My keys?
Amy's here for the stupid arches.
Mm.
And I told you to leave them there.